I'm Dan Kaplan, executive editor of SC Magazine, and sitting beside me is Gary Steele, the CEO of Proofpoint. Gary, thanks for joining us.
Hey, no problem. Great to be here.
I know Proofpoint as an email security company. Email security has been a big deal, remains a big deal, but I would imagine that some of the threats have shifted away from worrying about what's coming in your inbox and to other things. It's sort of expanded in scope. Can you talk about that?
It has. So in the classic email security world, probably the number one thing people worry about are directed malicious attacks, so spear phishing attacks. And we've made a lot of investment in this area. We actually recently introduced a new product in that area called targeted attack protection. We also see a general concern about just sensitive data. So how do you control and manage that sensitive data? Oftentimes that's in email, sometimes it isn't. But how do you manage, govern, and archive all that information for compliance and security purposes?
Right, so there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle now. It's not just like we don't want this pharmaceutical spam coming in. Right?
Much more complicated today, and I think a lot of that's driven by a lot of legislation around compliance. So people are really thinking about how do I control private information as it relates to my enterprise? How do I control it, make sure it doesn't leave? If I have to send it to somebody, how do I do that in a secure way? And then with all of the litigation that exists today, there's a whole different thinking about how do you retain information, how long do you need to keep it, and how do you control it?
Yeah. So let's talk about targeted attacks. That this whole term advanced persistent threat we saw crop up a couple of years ago, spear phishing. There's instances where people at various organizations by name are being sent emails and with the intention of getting them to click on something that is going to invite malware into their organization on behalf of the attacker.
That's absolutely right. And so this is not something that's just isolated to financial services. It truly is across industry. These attacks are very low volume. They may be targeted at one person or a handful of executives in an organization. Typically, the objective of that attack is to steal some form of data. So it could be steal credentials so you can log on to somebody's bank account. It could be just steal credentials so they can get on the network. It's all of those kinds of information that people are trying to steal, and those attacks are designed to make you behave a particular way. So they want you to click, they want that malicious code downloaded and installed on your laptop or system.
Without getting too much into the technology that Proofpoint provides, how do you stop a target attack? Because you have to imagine, if an attacker is finding someone by name, they really want to get in, they really want to make this happen, they're going to be resilient. So they're going to do everything they can.
Right, and these attacks, you contrast it to the old days where things were broad-based and blasted to everyone, and so the average observer would say, that's something I should stay away from. But with these attacks, there's a number of things. So one is you can look at the various behaviors of the sender. So who is sending? Have they sent traditionally to this enterprise? Have they sent to the person's coworkers? Is this coming from an IP that is brand new? The links that you would see, what's the nature of those links? What's the behavior of that website? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot more points of analysis that have to be done today. And so one of the things that these targeted attacks are driving is companies like Proofpoint to continue to innovate and drive sort of new techniques, new technology to solve these very complex problems.
Yeah. And I would imagine that if a company is being targeted in any way, they want to know that they're not just receiving that just kind of conventional malware that they're just throwing out to anyone and hope something sticks against a wall. But if they're being actually, someone is saying that, and let's get them, they want to know about it.
And they want to know about it, and they also then want to think about who it is that's targeting them. Mm-hmm. Is it just a hacker who's trying to steal data?
So the attribution is important.
It is. Yeah. So is it just a hacker who's trying to steal data? Is it a competitor who's trying to get information? Is it a foreign government that they may be competing in the market with? Mm-hmm. It's that collection of people that organizations really want to understand who is targeting them.
Yeah. Off camera, we were talking about a big driver for you guys is compliance, and I was a little bit surprised to hear that because compliance has been around so long and it's kind of just become a fate for many organizations, and they just are dealing with it. But maybe a lot of the programs and mindsets have moved a little bit more risk-based or specific to actually security being a driver. But compliance still plays a big role.
It does, and I think what's driving compliance today is all the various rules around the world about how you need to manage and deal with private data. And no organization today can have can tolerate the fact that they can have a breach around private data. So when people talk about compliance, it's typically how are they going to control and manage their private information, and fundamentally how do they secure it, and how do they think about that. So it's not just checking the box like, okay, I've got to meet these requirements, but they also really want to think about how are they going to secure that information so they don't have a breach that could then expose it.
So compliance can be a good thing?
You know, I think that a lot of people roll their eyes when they hear about compliance, but in reality, going through a process to really figure out how you can control and manage private information ultimately reduces your exposure and improves your security posture overall. So I think if you think about compliance from that perspective of how it's driving your security posture, I think it can be a good thing.
Yeah, and it seems that within a lot of organizations now, because data has really proliferated, and a key to the security puzzle is understanding where your data is, discovering it, classifying it, and I've heard that talked about, you know, a number of years ago, but I feel like now it's becoming more vogue to really zero in on your data specifically. Are you seeing that?
We definitely are, and organizations want to be able to, one, identify where critical information lives in their enterprise, whether it's behind the firewall where they have some control over it, whether it's being moved outside to some cloud-based app. You know, we use the term governance to discuss this kind of level of control. We have a solution that helps people track information as it moves across the enterprise. We see this as a very topical area right now. It has legal implications, it has compliance implications, and clearly it has big security implications, because you want to know if that sensitive data is in a place where it truly is at risk.
Yeah, and because of compliance, you know, regulations, you need to know where that data is. But that sounds okay. Great, I'll find the data, but it's not that easy.
It isn't, and it's gotten. I think it gets more complex all the time. So with more people bringing their own devices to work, all of that, you've got now data everywhere.
Sure.
And so that drive to just better understand exactly where it is and then what actions you want to take. And it's not necessarily that the fact that people need to lock down every bit of information, because that's oftentimes not practical, but helping users understand where is their data going to be most secure, having visibility in the enterprise of where data lives, that can have a huge advantage.
Yeah, and sometimes that enterprise-wide governance model is a good thing to get into place.
It definitely is. I think people have struggled with it without good technology. I think the opportunity now is how do you apply good technology to this problem that's getting much more complex.
Okay. Well, Gary Steele, CEO of Proofpoint, which went public this past spring.
In April, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, well, congratulations to you guys. And we'll keep you on our radar, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much.